The storage unit key was still warm from my wife's hand when they gave it to me. That's not possible, I know. She'd been gone for 11 days by then. The key had been sitting in a manila envelope at Hargrove and Associates, our family attorney's office, sealed with my name written in her handwriting. But when I held it, standing in that conference room with the afternoon light coming through the blinds, it felt warm. Maybe that was just me. Her name was Judith. We'd been married for 31 years. She died on a Tuesday morning in late October, the kind of cold, clear day that makes everything look sharp and brittle. A massive stroke. She was 57 years old, walking from the parking garage to her office at the hospital where she'd worked as an administrator for nearly 2 decades, and she was gone before the ambulance arrived. The neurologist told me it was fast. He said she wouldn't have felt much. I've held on to that like a life preserver ever since, even on the days when I'm not sure I believe it. The storage unit was the last item listed in her estate inventory. Everything else I expected. The house, the retirement accounts, her car, a small savings bond she'd kept from her mother, but Unit 114 at Secure Space Self-Storage on Millbrook Road was not something I had ever heard of. Not once in 31 years had my wife mentioned it. Not once had I seen a payment for it on any of our statements, which meant she'd been keeping a separate account somewhere. The attorney said the unit had been rented for 14 years under her maiden name. 14 years. I sat with that number in the parking lot of Hargrove and Associates for a long time before I could drive home. I want to be clear about something. My wife and I had a good marriage. I'm not saying that the way people say it at funerals, performing grief for an audience. I'm saying it because it's the truest thing I know. We argued about money sometimes, about the kids, about whose turn it was to call the plumber. We went through a rough patch around year 12 when my construction business nearly went under, and I wasn't easy to live with, but we came back from that. We built something real together. I believed, in the way a person can believe in gravity or mourning, that I knew her. The storage unit was on the east side of town, about 20 minutes from our house. I drove there on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after the attorney meeting. I'd been putting it off. I told myself I was giving myself time to grieve, but the truth is, I was afraid of what was inside. I kept imagining scenarios, none of them good. A second life. Another man. Money hidden from us for reasons I couldn't explain. The facility was one of those climate-controlled places with orange roll-up doors and fluorescent lighting that buzzes faintly no matter what time of day you arrive. A young woman at the front desk checked my ID against the estate paperwork without much interest and pointed me down a long corridor. Unit 114 was near the end. I stood in front of it for probably 2 full minutes. I'm not ashamed to say that. My hand was on the key, and I could not make myself put it in the lock. I thought about my daughter, who'd offered to come with me and whom I had turned down because I was certain there was nothing unusual inside, just some old furniture or holiday decorations my wife had stashed somewhere. I thought about how I was going to feel foolish calling her to say I couldn't open a storage unit door. I put the key in the lock. What I saw first was a rocking chair, an old one, painted white with a cushion on the seat that had sunflowers on it. I recognized it immediately because it had belonged to my wife's mother, and I had helped carry it out of her childhood home in Springfield when her parents moved into assisted living back in 2009. My wife had cried that day. She said she didn't have room for it in our house, but she couldn't bear to leave it behind. I'd assumed it went to Goodwill. Behind the rocking chair were stacked boxes, labeled in her handwriting, keepsakes. Photos, Mom. Photos, Dad. Baby things. And then, on a metal shelf along the far wall, in neat rows, binders. Maybe a dozen of them. Blue, the same color she used for her work files at home. And sitting on top of the center binder, like she'd left it there for exactly this moment, was a white envelope. My name on the front. Her handwriting. I sat down in her mother's rocking chair and I opened it. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten on her good stationery, the cream-colored kind she kept in the top drawer of her desk for thank you notes and birthday cards. Her penmanship was careful. It looked like she'd written it slowly, which was not how she usually wrote. She usually wrote fast, with a forward lean to her letters like she was always running slightly late. These letters were straight up and down. She began by saying she was sorry. She said she had wanted to tell me for years, that she had started the conversation in her head 1,000 times, that every time she got close, she would look at our life, our house, our kids, our ordinary Tuesday evenings watching television. And she would tell herself that the right moment hadn't come yet. And then the years kept going. She said she understood if I couldn't forgive her. She said she wouldn't blame me. Then she told me about a baby. In 1989, she wrote, before we met, she had been 23 years old and working her first job after college at a regional hospital in Dayton, Ohio. She had fallen in love with a doctor there. She described him as charming in the way that certain men are charming when they have decided they want something from you. He was 12 years older than her. He was also married, which she said she had not known at first, and by the time she did know, she was already pregnant. She did not tell him. She knew, she wrote, that he was not a man who would do the right thing, and she could not bear the humiliation of watching him confirm it. She was 23. She had no family nearby and very little money. She carried the pregnancy alone, working until her 8th month, and then she gave the baby up for adoption through a private agency in Cincinnati. A girl. She named her Rose on the birth certificate and then handed her to a social worker and drove herself home and never spoke of it again. We met 2 years later at a friend's wedding in Columbus. I was 30 and she was 25, and I thought she was the most put-together woman I had ever seen. We dated for a year and got married in a backyard ceremony with 40 people and a cake her aunt made from scratch. We had 2 children. We built a life. She never told me. I put the letter down when I reached that part. I sat in the rocking chair and I looked at the wall of the storage unit and I thought about 31 years. I thought about every conversation we'd ever had about honesty, about the way she used to say that secrets were just lies waiting for the right moment to become true. I thought about how she used to get quiet sometimes in a way I could never explain, a kind of internal absence that would last a day or two and then pass. I had always assumed it was stress. I had assumed I knew what was behind it. The rest of the letter explained the binders. 14 years ago, she wrote, she had hired a private investigator, not to find the girl. She was careful about that. Careful not to intrude on a life that wasn't hers to interrupt, but to know that she was okay. The binders were the reports. 14 years of them. Where she lived. What she did. Whether she was healthy and safe. She had a name by then, not Rose. Her adopted parents had named her Anna. She was 35 years old. She lived in Nashville, Tennessee. She was a high school music teacher. She was married to a man named, and here my wife had left a blank, a small white rectangle of space on the page where a name should have been, someone my wife described only as a kind man who clearly loved her. Anna had a daughter of her own. My wife had a photograph of them, tucked inside the back cover of the last binder. A woman with my wife's eyes in her hair, standing in a backyard holding a little girl. My wife had been a grandmother and hadn't told me. The letter ended this way, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But if there is any part of you that can understand why I was afraid, please know that being afraid was the worst mistake of my life. I should have trusted you. I should have trusted us. I love you. I'm sorry. Do with this what you think is right. I drove home. I sat in my driveway for a long time. I did not go inside immediately because I didn't know how to arrange my face yet, and my daughter was coming for dinner that evening and I needed more time before I could talk to another human being without falling apart. That night, I lay awake and I was angry. I want to be honest about that because I think people expect widowers to speak gently about their wives, to soften everything, and I am not going to do that here. I was furious. Not at the baby, not at the young woman my wife had been, not even entirely at the secret itself. I was furious at the years. At the 14 years of private investigation reports while I sat across the dinner table from her not knowing. At the idea that she had carried a whole other interior life for 3 decades and decided, alone, that I couldn't be trusted with it. She made that choice for me. She decided what I could handle, and I think that is what I kept coming back to in those long nights after. Not the secret, the decision to keep it. The assumption that our marriage was not strong enough to bear the truth. I spent about 3 weeks going through the binders. I did not do it all at once. I would take one down from the shelf, read through it at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and then put it back. The investigator was thorough. Anna had grown up in a suburb of Indianapolis with her adopted parents, a retired teacher and a school librarian. She had gone to Indiana University on a partial music scholarship. She had moved to Nashville at 26 and been there ever since. She seemed happy. That came through even in the dry language of an investigator's report. Notes about her laughing at a farmer's market, playing guitar on a front porch, coaching her daughter's soccer team. I found myself grateful for those details in a way I hadn't expected. Grateful that my wife had done this, had kept watch from a distance in the only way she knew how. It didn't undo the anger, but it complicated it, which I think is what happens when you love someone and they disappoint you at a fundamental level. It's not clean. It doesn't resolve into a single feeling you can name. I called my daughter eventually, not to tell her everything. I wasn't ready for that, but because I needed to hear her voice, and I needed to say out loud that I had found something in the storage unit that I was still trying to understand. She came over that Sunday and we sat on the back porch and I told her in pieces, watching her face as each piece landed. She cried. She got angry. She said things about her mother that she later apologized for, even though I told her she didn't need to. At the end, she asked me what I was going to do. I told her I didn't know yet. What I was really asking myself was a different question, not what to do about the secret, or about my marriage, or about the years I felt I'd lost to a version of my wife I hadn't fully known. What I was asking was whether any of this changed who she was to me, whether a person could be genuinely good and still be capable of this particular kind of cowardice. I kept coming back to a night maybe 15 years ago, when our son had been caught lying to us about something significant. I won't say what, it's his story to tell. And my wife had sat with him at the kitchen table for 2 hours and explained to him, carefully and with full seriousness, why honesty was the foundation of every relationship worth having. I had stood in the doorway listening to her and thought, she means every word of this. She does. I still believe she meant it. That's the part I can't fully reconcile. She meant it and she still couldn't do it. I made a decision in March, about 5 months after she died. I had spent a lot of time thinking about what she'd written at the end of her letter. Do with this what you think is right. And I'd decided that what was right was not going to be determined by what I felt, which was complicated and shifting. It was going to be determined by what I believed she would have wanted if she had ever found the courage to tell me herself. I think she would have wanted Anna to know she was thought of. I think she would have wanted Anna to know that she was not discarded or forgotten, that the woman who gave her up had spent 35 years carrying her. I am not Anna's family. I want to be clear about that. I am not her father, I have no claim on her, and I would never present myself as anything other than what I am, the husband of the woman who gave birth to her. But I am the only one left who can deliver the message my wife never had the courage to send. I wrote a letter, not a long one, 3 paragraphs. I introduced myself. I explained who I was and how I'd come to know about her, and I told her that the woman who gave her life had loved her from a distance for 35 years and had kept every report, every photograph, every record of who she became. I told her there were no expectations attached to this letter. I gave her my phone number and told her to call if she ever wanted to, and to disregard it entirely if she didn't. I mailed it on a Tuesday morning in March, the kind of cold, clear day that makes everything look sharp and brittle, which I realized only as I drove away from the post office was the same kind of day my wife had died. 6 weeks passed. I was not keeping count, but I was keeping count. On a Wednesday evening in late April, my phone rang with a 615 area code, Nashville. I sat down before I answered. She had a voice that was lower than I expected, steady and careful. She said she had read my letter 4 times before she could respond to it. She said she had not known the name of the woman who gave her up, only that she'd been young and alone, and that the decision had been made out of fear rather than indifference. Her adopted parents had told her that much, and she had made peace with it, she said, a long time ago. But she had also never fully stopped wondering. We talked for 2 hours. I told her about her mother, about the woman I had known, which was most of her, but not all of her. I told her about the rocking chair and the binders and the photograph I had found in the back of the last one. She cried quietly for a little while and then said she was sorry for crying. And I told her there was no reason to apologize, and then we were both quiet for a moment. The way you are when two people are feeling the same thing from very different distances. She asked if she could see the photograph. I drove to Nashville in May. I want to say that felt brave, but it didn't feel like anything other than necessary. I met Anna at a coffee shop near her house, one of those independent places with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu. She was already there when I arrived. She stood up when she saw me, and I don't know what either of us expected, but we shook hands and then, a little awkwardly, hugged briefly. She had her mother's eyes. She had the same way of tilting her head slightly when she was listening. It was almost unbearable to notice. I gave her the last binder and the photograph. I gave her the letter her mother had written to me, which felt like a significant thing to surrender, but also like the only right thing. She read parts of it right there at the table. She kept her hand flat on the page like she was feeling for warmth. Her daughter, who is 7, was at school. Anna showed me a picture on her phone. A round-faced girl with my wife's hair, grinning at the camera in a soccer uniform. I drove home that evening on the interstate with the windows down, which is not something I usually do on highways. The air was warm and carried the particular green smell of May in Tennessee. I thought about my wife, about 31 years, about all the things a person carries alone when they've decided the people who love them can be trusted to help carry them. I thought about how I might have done differently, whether I had ever given her reason to believe our marriage couldn't hold the weight of the truth. I came back to the same answer I always come back to. I don't know. I'll never know. She made her choice before I had a chance to show her what I was capable of. That's the hardest part. Not the secret itself, but the closing off of the question before it was ever asked. She was a good woman who made a fearful choice and lived inside it for 30 years. I have spent the months since trying to decide whether those two things can coexist in the same person, and I think the answer is yes. I think that is, in fact, the most human thing there is. We are almost never purely one thing. My wife was generous and funny, and she held my hand every time we were on an airplane because she knew I hated flying, and she kept 14 years of surveillance reports on a daughter she couldn't allow herself to contact. Both of those things are true. I have learned, slowly, to hold them both without letting one cancel out the other. Anna texts me sometimes now. Not often, just occasionally. A photograph of her daughter at a school performance. A question about her mother. What kind of music did she like? Was she close to her own parents? Did she ever talk about Dayton? I answer what I can and I tell her honestly when I don't know. We are not family exactly. We are something without a clean name. Two people connected by a woman who is gone and who left us both, in different ways, more than we expected. Last month, Anna sent me a picture of the rocking chair. She'd taken it home after our meeting in Nashville, repainted it, put a new cushion on it in her daughter's room. The sunflowers were gone. The cushion was blue with small white stars. It looked like a chair that had found its right place at last. I think my wife would have wept to see it. I think she would have wept, and then she probably would have said something practical about the paint color, because that was how she managed emotion, by turning quickly toward the useful thing. I knew that about her. I knew that, and 100 other things. And I did not know this one enormous thing, and I am learning, at 63, that love and knowledge are not the same word, that you can love someone completely and still not be given access to every room. I'm still angry sometimes. I want to say that too because I think it's important. Grief is not a project you complete. But I am also, on most days, grateful. Grateful for 31 years. Grateful that she left the letter. Grateful that a woman named Anna picked up the phone on a Wednesday evening in April and said hello with a voice that was steadier than mine. That's all I have. That's the whole of it. A key, a rocking chair, 14 binders, and a daughter my wife carried quietly for 35 years until she couldn't anymore. I'm still figuring out what to do with all of it, but I'm figuring it out with the windows down and the air coming in, which is the best any of us can do. I keep coming back to the rocking chair, not to what was behind it, the binders, the letter, the 14 years of reports, but to the chair itself, white paint, sunflower cushion. My wife cried the day she carried it out of her parents' house, and I stood there assuming it went to Goodwill. It didn't. She kept it in the dark for years, the same way she kept everything she couldn't figure out how to say out loud. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any religious sense. I'm not a man who reaches for that kind of comfort easily. But in the plain, practical sense, the choices we make build the rooms we end up living in. Judith made a choice at 23 that was understandable and human and ultimately cost her 35 years of peace, not because the universe punished her for it, because she punished herself. She locked the door and swallowed the key and called it protection, and what it actually was, I think, was fear dressed up as consideration for other people. That's what I've had to reckon with. Not her secret, but the decision she made alone about what I could handle. She was a woman of genuine decency. She raised our kids with more patience than I had. She showed up for people in ways that were quiet and consistent and real. And she still couldn't trust our marriage with the truth of who she was before I knew her. That's not a character flaw so much as a failure of nerve. The particular kind that comes from loving something so much you'd rather hide than risk losing it. I understand it. I don't think I would have done differently at 23. Alone in Dayton with no money and a decision that felt too large for one person to carry. What I can't fully forgive, and I'm still working on this, is the 30 years after. The 30 years when I was right there, when she had every opportunity to say, "There's something I need to tell you." I think we're strong enough. I think you're strong enough. The thing about wisdom is that it doesn't come from having the right answers. It comes from being willing to ask the hard questions in the first place, out loud, to the people who deserve to hear them. Judith was one of the wisest people I knew in almost every room of her life. In this one room, she went silent. And silence has a cost that compounds the way debt does, quietly, year after year, until someone opens a storage unit and finds the bill. What I've tried to do since, and I'm not saying I've succeeded, is be the thing she couldn't be. To reach toward Anna rather than away. To make the phone call, send the letter, drive to Nashville, and sit across from a woman with my wife's eyes and say, "You were not forgotten." That took something. Not bravery exactly. More like a decision that the pain of reaching out was smaller than the pain of staying closed. Anna has her mother's rocking chair now. Blue cushion, white stars, her daughter's bedroom. That chair traveled a long road to get to the right place. So did the truth inside it. Both of them got there eventually, which is not nothing. It's not everything, but it's not nothing. I'm 63 years old, and I'm still learning that the people we love most are not entirely knowable, and that loving them anyway after the knowing falls short is the whole of the work, not a lesson. Just the work. Just what you do with the windows down and the air coming in and the road still in front of you.